NASCAR, answer me this question. Why is this even a question? NASCAR has yet to grant Kyle Larson a playoff waiver. Now, it's very important to note that as of yesterday, Hendrick Motorsports has not applied for that waiver. But the fact that there is any discourse on this, drivers such as Joey Logano weighing in that they don't necessarily want to see Kyle Larson get a playoff waiver, there's enough of a question that I felt like this video is necessary because I think it's absolutely ridiculous that Kyle Larson could not be granted a playoff waiver for NASCAR's championship. And on a serious note, for those of you who are longtime fans of the channel, yes, indeed, this is a Kyle Larson video, but I have made the executive decision now that Kyle Larson is running the Indianapolis 500 and that if I made the Kyle Larson intro for every video that Kyle Larson participates or is mentioned in, the intro would lose its fun. So my new rule for the Kyle Larson intro is that if Kyle Larson qualifies on the pole or wins, doesn't have to be the Indy 500, but any IndyCar race, you get the intro for that video. So there's my new deal. But yes, it is indeed a Kyle Larson video, just not the intro. So yeah, I mean, this is so silly that this is being talked about. I thought it would be a no-brainer that Kyle Larson would get a playoff waiver because, as you'll find out in this video, there have been so many exceptions made to the playoff eligibility of drivers over the course of time and history that it really doesn't make any sense why this is even a discussion. The only thing that I can make sense of is that it's pettiness and it's fear of Larson potentially winning the championship after skipping what many consider one of the crown jewel races in the sport. And I get it. I do actually get it. Like we all have egos, right? As human beings, we do. And sometimes when you're treated the entire rest of the year like you're the biggest fish in the pond, and then you're not treated like the biggest fish in the pond on one day by one of your most important stars, it hurts a little. And maybe you don't want to necessarily grant a waiver. And I'm sure it hurts some of the drivers and the teams in the NASCAR Cup Series. But Kyle Larson made the effort to get to Charlotte. And I think that's the really important thing. He wasn't just like, screw Charlotte, I'm running the Indy 500. He did to a certain extent, but the minute his obligations were done in Indianapolis, he was on a plane and he was flying to Charlotte. It's very interesting, too, that the IndyCar rule, where they've changed it recently, you used to be able to just put a relief driver in for once you've had started the race as a primary driver. You could get out of the car and let someone else jump in and finish the race for you. That has gone off of the books since Kurt Busch did the Indy 500 in 2014. IndyCar changed a whole lot of rules for Kurt Busch in 2014. You don't even have to start at the back anymore if you go to a backup car because of Kurt Busch. It's insanity that they bent over backwards for Kurt Busch quite in the way that they did, but they did. And it's kind of set up this situation where Kyle Larson essentially had to prioritize the Indianapolis 500 for his sponsors and partners and his team and the commitment that he made to the fans to race the Indy 500. He did all of those things because there really wasn't another option provided by IndyCar once he started the race. And now we're in this situation. Now, like I said in the intro, Kyle Larson and Hendrick Motorsports, as of yesterday, it's possible it's changed today, have not yet applied for a waiver to get into NASCAR's playoffs, which are the way that they determine a champion now. Now, I think it's important to also note that Kyle Larson, despite missing an entire race, not scoring any points, is still third in the Drivers' Championship in the NASCAR Cup Series. Third, missing one race. And we'll talk about the playoffs here in a second, but I think it's ridiculous that somebody who's third in the points after missing a race, there would be any kind of a consideration that he's out of contention for the championship. It's ridiculous. But this is Sirius XM, a clip from their show on the NASCAR radio channel. And this is Elton Sawyer doing an interview with NASCAR radio and talking about the playoff waiver system in NASCAR. I think it's an important bit of context from NASCAR's perspective before we get into why it doesn't make any damn sense.
I haven't seen a request come through, so really not a lot to report on that topic. Just based off, we'll let the process take its course. I'm sure at some point they will send in that request, and when they do, we'll go through our due diligence and meet with our people. And again, this will be a decision that'll not just one person will make, but a group will sit and look at it and discuss it and move forward.
For those that are curious, what is the process? Like, what does Hendrick do, and then what does the sanctioning body do once that request is submitted?
Well, I think you look at it from the standpoint of, obviously they submit the request. He has missed the race, so we start this. It's a little bit uncharted waters for us because that in the past the waivers have been mostly given to for a medical reason. So this one's a little bit different from that aspect, and just a lot of, we've had some preliminary discussions, but we haven't landed.
So I brought up this article from our friends at the Daily Downforce because they've done an amazing job of compiling all of the times that in the NASCAR Cup Series a playoff waiver has been issued. The most common, as stated here, is a medical situation, whether it's an injury or some other form of reason that the driver had to miss a race for health reasons. I think that's reasonable, although we'll talk about one of the unreasonable cases here in just a second. Denny Hamlin had one of those in 2014. Kyle Busch in 2015. We'll get back to that. Tony Stewart in 2016. Austin Dillon in 2020. And those are the four major ones there. The weird thing about Kyle Busch, as it states here in the article, is that he missed the first 11 races of the season. I believe he came back at Sonoma, essentially missed the entire Fox Sports portion of the season that year, and went on to win the championship, which at that point, now I get it. He got hurt at Daytona. It was because Daytona didn't put a soft wall down on the inside of the racetrack, blah, 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 blah. You get right? You had a situation, I referenced Slapshoe's amazing Dam of Legitimacy video from his channel where he talked about things like this. And when you have a driver who misses a third of the season and wins the championship, regardless of how unfair it was that Kyle Busch got hurt, wasn't a good look for NASCAR that he won that championship and was granted a waiver. But at that point, that was when the waiver system, in my opinion, was busted, irrevocably busted. At that point, you just go, what are we doing here? Why did you do that? Why did you make that decision? And they made the decision because Kyle Busch is a huge driver, and it wouldn't make any sense if you had this playoff thing and Kyle Busch just runs roughshod over the racing over NASCAR the rest of the year, and then you have to explain to the casual fans, well, we have a playoff system and this guy won all these races and winning's supposed to matter, but he's not in the playoffs because he got hurt at Daytona. For some reason, that doesn't make any sense to modern race fans anymore. Explain that one, I have no idea. But here's the real kind of damning part of all of this, and it's that in 2015, Kurt Busch was suspended when there was an accusation that he had domestically abused a girlfriend. And ultimately, these charges were dropped. He was never officially charged. It was taken away. It was taken off the board. He was suspended for essentially nothing. And NASCAR made a decision, which was the right one, given the circumstances, that Kurt Busch was allowed to take part in the championship. Again, makes sense why a waiver was granted, because NASCAR perhaps overreacted to the circumstance there. But then Chase Elliott last year was really the big one. And frankly, NASCAR kind of got away with one last year because Chase Elliott didn't actually qualify for the playoffs. But he missed 6 races due to his skiing incident at the beginning of the midway point of the first half of the season, the first quarter of the season. Chase Elliott missed because he hurt himself in a skiing accident. And then he was suspended another race because he had intentionally wrecked someone and was also given a playoff waiver for that. And the fact that Chase Elliott, an exception was made for Chase Elliott for breaking a NASCAR rule and getting suspended for on-track behavior. This wasn't a sickness. This wasn't an injury. This wasn't a court case. He broke a rule, was penalized for that, and was still allowed to compete for the championship despite breaking a rule that was considered so egregious by NASCAR that they had to suspend him for a race. And you're going to tell me that Kyle Larson, who prioritized the Indianapolis 500 and running that race and getting a full race underneath his belt, which he did a great job, made a mistake in the pits, but still earned Rookie of the Year, and I believe it was deserved. Like, Christian Rasmussen had a great race. There's no doubt about it. That kid is a superstar. Kyle Larson, for the full month, was the Rookie of the Year as far as I am concerned. He earned that at the Indianapolis 500 and made a reasonable effort to race in Charlotte. He broke no NASCAR rule. He did everything by the book. The only thing that he didn't do was prioritize NASCAR when he's the points leader, and despite missing a race, he ends up third in the points. So he has done everything that he needed to do to earn himself a spot in this championship. And just the fact, I mean, like, on principle, and I hope the NASCAR makes the right decision here, but on principle, if you're going to penalize a racer for racing, horrible look. Horrible look. Pretty much as bad as you could get, if it does happen. I hope it won't. I hope the backlash is significant enough. But when you have Penske drivers making bad takes, a lot of times NASCAR seems to listen to Joey Logano and Brad Keselowski more than the rest. So I know Brad doesn't drive for Penske anymore, but boy, oh boy, I still haven't gotten over the fact that Brad said stage racing is how racing would be done if we started auto racing in the modern era. Come on, Brad. Come on, man. Come on, man. But yeah, I think Kyle Larson, if he doesn't get a waiver, they've turned the waiver system into even more of a joke than when they just gave them out like they were lifesavers at a bad breath convention. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.